What's going on, everyone? TheAireaidLord is here. Welcome back to another Season 9 review vlog. This one is for Episode 15 of Season 9, entitled The Calm Before. And I'm going to be honest, I did make a review of this immediately after the episode aired, and it was not the best. It was a lot of pouting, a lot of stomping of feet, complaining. As it was made obvious in my reaction, I was not happy about one of the Pike victims that was beheaded and destroyed and maimed in that manner. I'm planning on addressing it in other vlogs, one of which I'm going to be doing a collaboration on. So I'm going to try to make this video as factual and as critical as my other reviews, in the sense that I review the different technical aspects, pacing, directing, callbacks, characters, things like that, because there was more to this episode than just those deaths. The deaths happened at the end, but there was more to this episode than just those deaths. And I mean, we have a lot to unpack. So I mean, let's get right into it. It's hard because this is a major comic book moment, and it's kind of like the same thing with when Negan was introduced. Like, you knew when he was introduced that two main characters, or actually no, at the time it was one, everyone thought it was just one person, was going to be killed in a brutal fashion. And I'd say that The Walking Dead had two of these moments, and they were both adapted. The first being Negan smashing his victim with Lucille, the bat, and then the other was the multiple people being beheaded and put on pikes. Now, this is a higher kill count than Negan really ever had. And we should also throw Jesus in there, because he did die before any of the Whisperers were introduced, any of the named ones. We had that confrontation in the graveyard where he was killed. So you could really say that that was their introductory death. But then it seemed like the Whisperers were losing. Daryl did win that fight against Beta. And this is basically like, you know, the Empire Strikes Back, Revenge of the Sith kind of thing, where the enemy has been losing. And some of the Whisperers had mentioned that to Alpha, like, where's the retribution? You know, we gave up two of their people. We only got Lydia back. We look weak. And Lydia had warned Henry about this. The conversation they had in the building, she said, you made my mom look weak. She's not going to let this go. So they've been building up the fact that she was going to strike back at some point. And she chose a moment of unity for all of the communities to do it. We see in that opening scene this kind of montage-y scene where these two stragglers happen upon the hilltop. And they keep saying, I was joking about this in my reaction, they keep saying happy anniversary, happy anniversary. And I was like, why do they keep saying that? But it's because there's this passage of time. The 5-6 years go by in the Rick Grimes time jump. And you see that they happened upon the hilltop, and now they've been living there for a while. And this woman is actually the person that was making the hilltop coins all along. So it has it has a bit of connection, because Lydia's wearing that necklace that, I mean, it obviously connects her to Henry. But because they're on their way to that, which, one thing I don't understand was, I thought a couple things with this episode. There were a few, like, I don't want to say plot holes, but just weird plot, either conveniences or circumstances, that had me scratching my head in this episode. And I know a lot of this episode adapted the comics, and the comics didn't go into this either, but the show is meant to improve, and you've also got film, so you're able to go a bit beyond what pages on a book drawings can do. Drawings can only get you so much. Written words can only get you so much. Like, there were a few things with this episode. The first being, why did this couple, the one that kept talking about their anniversary, the one with the hilltop coins, why did they leave the hilltop at a different point in time. Because if you remember, a few episodes back, Tara, Magna, Yumiko, that whole group with Earl and Tammy and the baby, remember when they get stuck with those walkers on the road and then the highwaymen ride up on their horses and take them out? Why was that couple, the Happy Anniversary Hilltop Coin couple, why weren't they with that convoy? Because to me, that was the Hilltop convoy that was going to the kingdom for the fair. And there were, like, they just went on their own. And they didn't have any protection of any kind. Like, the Hilltop, even Tara, they were all very aware of the threat of the Whisperers, even when those walkers showed up on the road. And Tara, Magna, and Yumiko were going to confront the walkers. Tara said, watch for their hands, watch for their knives, because they could be people underneath the skin. So they knew about this threat, and they just let this couple go in this little wagon, like, oh, we're just gonna have a nice leisurely stroll down the road to the fair, dip-de-dip-de-doo. And it's like, well, no shit, something's gonna happen. They knew that these Whisperers were psychotic. I mean, Daryl was running from them with Lydia and Henry, and he knew that the threat was out there. And I just don't understand why there was no armed guard, no soldiers. Like, were they just expecting the highwaymen to watch the roads? Because the highwaymen did happen upon the tipped over cart, but after the fact. So either they were already at the fair trying to, like, get their movie in, or they just did a shitty job and didn't realize it, because that's the only thing I can think of. They didn't have an armed escort with this couple because they thought that the highwaymen were protecting the roads so that they'd be safe from any threat. Also, but again, I don't want to use that excuse that everyone thinks that everything's safe just because they've been living safe for 5-6 years. The truth is, this Whisper conflict, like, the Whisperers walked up to the gates of the Hilltop a few episodes back. Like, everyone at the Hilltop should know that these people are psychotic and that they mean business. So for like, I just don't understand. Like, maybe they thought that they were good fighters so that they could fend off any attackers. It was just, that was kind of confusing to me, that whole thing. All right. And then some of the other plot stuff, I mean, I'll jump to the fair. And this is where the comic confusion comes in, because in the comic book, Alpha infiltrates the fair. She uses, it's different in the comics, but in the comics, she just wears a dress. In the show, she actually cuts the hair off of that Hilltop lady who makes the coins, the tipped over caravan I was just talking about, and uses her wig, like basically her hair and her design, as a disguise to get inside. Now, few things they don't show. First of all, how the hell did she get into the fair if she didn't have the convoy? Because the cart was tipped over, the husband's dead, so how did she get... Because the kingdom has those giant gates. It's a gated community. I don't understand how she was able to so easily get inside. And the comics doesn't explain this either. She just kind of blends in. Like, wouldn't you think something suspicious if a woman in a dress with a hat and blonde hair just, like, creepily walks up to the gates and is like, oh, I'm part of Alexandria, I'm here for the fair? Like, I guess everyone's just drunken and in a good mood, and they just assumed that this woman was gonna mean them no harm. Like, it just kind of confusing to me, right? Like, you don't suspect anything at all. And then the biggest thing, which I think a lot of people were talking about, is how, I mean, she killed what, like 7-8 people? All the people she had in the barn. So here's the thing. We don't know how she even captures her victims. We don't even know. Like, Henry went to the boiler room where the pipe was. So supposedly there were a few Whisperers there who probably were hiding. When Henry went inside the boiler room, they captured him. Because they didn't kill their victims right then and there. Because in the comic book, I believe Alpha lures them all to a certain location and then just cuts their heads off. And then basically collects their heads like sand dollars at the beach, and just puts them in a bag and brings them to the Pikes, puts them all on, and then returns to the Whisperer camp. But because of Siddiq's flashback that he shows the group in his eulogy, we know that everyone was alive in that barn, that the Highwaymen give them an opening. For a very brief moment, the Highwaymen give them an opening. Ozzy comes in, freaking Gordon Freeman swinging that wrench. I believe Enid kills a Whisperer. Like, they put up a fight. Like, some of them kill some of the Whisperers. Like, even the ones that are still tied up, they try to trip them and fight. But it just seems like Alpha had this whole thing planned out. There's way too many Whisperers. She just comes into the shadows, and it's, I guess, assumed that she just it was just numbers. It was just a numbers thing. Like, there were more Whisperers in that moment than there were people that were captured. So it's just, assumed that they all fought back and in that setting, but we didn't even get to see how they were captured. Like, Henry's the only one that had setup, because he was with Lydia, and then he heard a noise in the boiler room and then went to investigate, and then he never came back. So it's assumed there was a trap set for him there. But all of the rest, we have no idea. Like, Enid 1 second is with Alden and Luke at the when they're performing their musical thing, and then she's just like suddenly not there. Again, this is like during the daytime. I don't know if this happens during the waning evening, but just I wish it was shot differently so that maybe we saw the progression of time. Maybe it's daytime and then the sun's setting, and some of the we're noticing that some of the characters are missing. Like if it was shot just a little bit differently, I think it would have had a greater impact, and maybe it would have filled some of the plot holes so people didn't think that it was ludicrous that this woman was able to capture 8 people. Like, literally, she'd have to have multiple Whisperers infiltrate the fair to drag 8 people off the fairgrounds to this barn. That's the thing. Like, how do you drag all of these bodies? Like, do you just knock them all out? Do you have other Whisperers that infiltrated the fair and they have the heavy lifting duty to get these bodies out? Because again, they're not beheaded when they're in the barn. And also, let's also remember that there was technically a 9th victim, Siddiq. Siddiq was meant to be on the Pike as well, but Alpha left him alive to tell the tale of what happened, which that also doesn't make sense, because she told Daryl when she was showing him the giant walker herd, she told Daryl that you'll find the border to the north. Like, she already made it clear that she was showing him this border as a show of force. Like, don't cross my territory, because what just happened there will happen to the 17,000th degree if you try anything else. Like, it was already clear cut that this happened. Like, the thing, again, that was a plot convenience for the show. They kept Siddiq alive so that he could tell that story. So you could, like, it was the only way you were going to get the story of what happened to them during the capture, because who else is going to tell it? Like, are you just going to show the flashback for the sake of it and have none of our other characters know? So Siddiq, being the messenger, giving the eulogy, he's our only window into what happened into those events. But it's just a little absurd that Alpha's like, oh, I'll leave you alive to tell the tale. And, if they're going to leave a character alive to tell the tale, I wish it was Henry. Why couldn't we have just had him tied to a tree again, beaten up, and then he gets to stand up there and give a passionate speech about, all the people that we lost and that whole thing. But a few other things that frustrated me, like the Highwaymen, seriously, like, you kill them off already. They were in, two episodes. They were in episode 13 when they were introduced, and then in episode 15, they were killed because they were trying to play hero and save our group, which, I mean, if you can't, they weren't able to protect the roads and protect the hilltop woman with the coins, the means by which Alpha was originally able to infiltrate the fair. However, they were smart enough to see Alpha dragging all of these bodies into this barn and then break into the barn, swinging the wrench. Like, the thing is, shouldn't they have had more people? More of the when they saw that going on at the barn, when those bodies were being dragged in the barn, Ozzy and the Highwaymen should have been like, all right, let's gather our forces Let's gather all the highwaymen we can because it seems like there's going to be a lot of these fuckers in here. Or maybe we should, radio in or send a freaking SOS message back to the kingdom. Like somebody, like get reinforcements because I don't know how many people the Whisperers have compared to the communities, but like if it was just Whisperers versus the community minus the walkers, like who would win? That's my question. Like, have the numbers been thinned out because of all-out war, the destruction of the sanctuary? Like, are we really down that many people where they wouldn't be able to form a militia to fight back against them? Because that's what they're going to need to do moving forward, regardless that this happened. But it's just ridiculous that, like, Ozzy didn't have the foresight to know what situation he was getting himself into. He sees this barn and he's like, oh, I'm just going to whack a few heads and save these people. It's like, oh shit, there's more of them than I thought. Oh, well, I guess I'm dead. Like what? It just was a little absurd. Like I'm thinking that to myself, like, did he not, like, this guy has survived just as long as all of our other survivors, okay? Because he's an older guy. He's been playing cowboy, dress-up highwaymen. We don't know what he did in the past. We don't know what his role was before he was part of this band of cowboys wearing dress-up crap. But he needed to have survived to a long point to get to the point where he is now. So why did he think running in there with one other guy was a good strategy to save everybody? Because it wasn't. All he did was get himself killed. Had he not run in there, he would have lived, but for some reason he thought he could Rambo, literally John Rambo it, and save everybody and save the day, and it didn't happen. I don't know, man, because I almost would have rathered the comic route where Alpha just beheads everybody and doesn't drag them to... There's no barn. In the comic, there's no barn that she drags them to that's close to the kingdom or close to the... I don't even know. Like, I don't even know where this barn is in relation to the kingdom. Like, how far did she drag all these bodies? Like, and again, like, there's no way she dragged 8 bodies on her own. There was other Whisperers doing this with her, but then how did they get in the fair? Did they wear disguises too? We didn't see that. Like, it just didn't make sense. And in an episode where there was a lot of good stuff, like I loved the scene. There were a bunch of scenes that I loved. I loved the fair. I loved the diversity in the fair. Like you had candy apples, Judith throwing the dunk tank thing that the Oceanside sponsored, where Eugene was in the tank, was hilarious. I love Judith as a character. That was so funny. Eugene's like, you couldn't throw that thing, farther than, and he's like taunting her, and then he gets dunked. Like, it was funny. Like, there was some comedy relief. We finally got to see what the movie was. It was Looney Tunes, like old cartoons. That was pretty funny. I'm trying to think what else was there. I mean, I love that conversation they had before they signed the charter. Like, Gabriel offers asylum to Lydia. They have this group discussion about the Whispers, and it's cool because under Rick Grimes' leadership, you would have had this discussion way, way back. Like, as soon as this Whisper conflict started up, Rick would have been like, all right, gather everybody. We're freaking figuring out how to deal with these psychopaths. But because of Michonne's stance of isolating herself and everything, like, no one was able to ever come together to talk about this issue. Carol and Ezekiel didn't even know about the Whispers until this episode. And then they have this joint meeting, and they're like, yeah, all this shit went down, and there's these, crazy skin-wearing freaks out there, so we need to be careful. Like, from that moment, they knew they should have been careful, and they got led into it. They just got completely played. And it just, in a way that I don't know, I couldn't logically see it. For it to go down the way it did. And again, I'm talking about how Alpha was able to do all the shit that she did in infiltrating. It's just beyond belief to an extent. And I know the way they did it really was how it was adapted in the comics. I mean, 1 second Alpha's just there, and then the next she's bragging about her bloody machete, and then the next moment everyone's freaking their heads on pikes, and you're like, well, how did that happen? It's like looking up in the sky and seeing somebody just falling from space, and you're like, how did this happen to some, like you're just trying to, like 2 + 2 = 6, and you're not understanding the math. So I appreciated the fare. I like the attention to detail in terms of the set. Like, I saw the behind the scenes. There were some cool things behind the scenes of all of the different communities. A lot of people were in my reaction video were mentioning how I found out Rachel, the girl who flipped off Tara, who's from Oceanside, because, like, we don't know what happened to Sydney. I guess we can assume Sydney's dead if Rachel is the leader representative of the Oceanside. But, like, I guess, yeah, Oceanside still exists, but it's even more of a confusing thing. Like, now I'm asking myself, why have we not seen Oceanside in freaking however many years? Like, maybe when Michonne isolated herself, Oceanside said, you know what, we're going to do the same thing because it was working for us back when the Saviors were in charge, and now, you know, we kind of feel okay with this. I don't know. Again, we don't have any answers. They just refuse to go into any detail about that community. It just blows my mind. I don't understand. They just don't give it screen time. They just don't care about its story. Like, when it needs to be brought into the bigger picture of things, yeah, they'll talk about Oceanside, but individually, other than the first episode where Tara stumbled across them, there wasn't much else. So, figure that one out. I don't know. That's an ongoing thing. That's not exclusive to this episode. But I like how it wasn't a random girl. I like how they got an older Rachel. They recast Rachel, kind of like Henry. They had the younger Lint's brother playing him. And then you got the older Lint's brother who played older Henry. So, there were a cool, like, I loved the Walker Horde. Like, that's the biggest horde we've ever seen. Bigger than that Season 6 horde in the Quarry. The one that causes the events of No Way Out, where Carl loses his eye. That was a massive horde, man. Of course that's going to come into play at some point. But I like that adapted scene. Like, it was a little weird because they get captured at nighttime. Michonne, Carol, and Daryl, they get captured, and Yumiko, they get captured at nighttime. And then all of a sudden, Daryl is being held at gunpoint by Alpha, and it's daytime. I'm like, how long were they walking for it to go from day to night? Like, what the heck was going on there? But I did like the discussion. One other thing I did really like, but it made me angry at Alpha's character, but in a good way. Alpha is such a freaking hypocrite. We got to see another adapted scene where Alpha is crying because Lydia rejected her, and she also spared Lydia. So Alpha was like a 1-2 punch. Like, Lydia, not like Alpha thought, like, oh, you're coming with me. Alpha was shocked that Lydia was saying no. Like, you know, I know how abusive you've been. This way of living is better than yours will ever be. And Alpha really didn't want to kill her own blood. So she was in this pickle where she's like, fine, just stay here. So and it's funny because Daryl's like, did you kill Lydia? And then it goes to that flashback where Alpha catches Lydia in the movie theater. The two of them walk out. And I love that scene where Lydia stands up to Alpha. I mean, props to Cassidy. I mean, she's been doing a great job as Lydia. I just love that scene where Lydia just plants her own 2 feet and tells Alpha to go pound sand. And I loved it because it's really Lydia's biggest, like, this is her official leap forward into the communities. Like, she's now kind of one of them, one of the Alexandrians, Kingdomites, whatever the hell you want to call her. And it was just like, I wanted to just clap. I was like, awesome. Like, honestly, you should just kill this woman now because she's already doing horrible things. And yeah, I don't know. You know what? Maybe I'm thinking to myself, I know it would be a cop-out answer, but do you think maybe when everyone's watching the movie, that's when Alpha starts dragging her victims? But the thing is, would everybody really just stop everything they're doing? I know, I get it. They're seeing a movie. They haven't seen one in a bazillion years because of the apocalypse. But, like, all of your armed guards, all of the people watching the gate, like, they're just going to stop what they're doing, knowing there's a threat. Again, Daryl has briefed everyone in that scene earlier, telling every single leader of every community, look, There is a threat. I dealt with it. I rescued Henry. I rescued Lydia. This threat is not going to go quietly. We need to deal with it. It's beyond, like, because there were a lot of people in that audience watching the movie. Like, I'm thinking to myself, did all of them really let their guard down, having a fun time? Because that's what the show wants you to believe, that every single person let their guard down, and this woman just came in and just, lit a fire under the mattress while the party's going on upstairs, and the whole place burns down. So, the same kind of analogy, really, and it's parts of it, again, are a bit beyond comprehension for me. So I don't know. It's and again, I'll get to the deaths in another vlog. I don't want to focus on that. I'm just focusing on how all of this was pieced together, and I hope I did an adequate job for you guys. You guys can comment, tell me what you think. I'm trying to think of a score to give this episode, because, like, I don't know, I'll give it like a solid, I don't know, I'm like 7.58. Like, I'm kind of like teetering between there, because again, like, some of the factors and believability of this episode, like, there were a lot of parts that were really well done. Like, the Alpha Lydia confrontation, great, excellent. And also, Beta, I liked that he kind of like had a head turn moment when Alpha said that when Alpha tells everybody that her daughter is no longer a concern. Beta even said to Daryl, he's like, all you had to do was give me the girl and all of this would have been undone. And then Alpha says, actually, no, wait a minute. I don't care about my daughter anymore. I've disowned her. And Beta has a moment, like, he doesn't say it, but I know he's thinking it, where he's like, wait a minute. I just risked my life, fell down an elevator shaft, did all of this shit to get this girl, and you're telling me that she's not worth it now? Like, he has because he's a loyal soldier. He's basically Alpha's bodyguard for all intents and purposes, and he kind of has a what the F moment, and it's a very slight, it's Ryan Hurst who plays him, does a great job, but he has this very slight nonverbal cue where he doesn't say anything, because if he did, he'd be dead most likely, but he doesn't say anything, but he has this look where he just kind of turns his head and he's like, wait a minute, like, what have we been, I thought we were doing this to get your daughter back, and then we were leaving. Like, he says, when Daryl and him are fighting, and Daryl's hiding under the floorboard, he says to Daryl, he's like, you and your people mean nothing to me. All I want is the girl. He's like, listen, like, I don't want to deal with you people. Once we get Lydia, we're getting the hell out of here, and we don't want to deal with you. Like, I feel like that would be his stance if he were in charge. But Alpha has to prove herself. Like, her leadership was threatened by, those two people she beheaded. Like, she feels threatened, and she has to prove a point. She has to prove a point of her power and leadership, even though she's got a lot of weak qualities that are, kind of intensifying underneath the armor. And it's, that scene where the Whisperer sees her crying and then she kills it. Like, what a hypocrite. What a hypocrite. She knows that if that Whisperer told other Whisperers that Alpha was crying, it would be a threat to her leadership. And at this point, she's been Alpha for so long, she's power crazed. She's power crazed, absolutely consumed by this world, and she's just willing to break her own rules, if it suits her. And I think she had her daughter as an anchor for so long, and she just never thought that her manipulative grasp over her would slip. And I think it's officially slipped. That conversation proved it, and now she's just, like, losing it. And it's interesting because as much as it seems like Alpha won in this episode, as much as it seems like she won, put those heads on the pikes, everything she did, it kind of feels like she lost something. She lost her daughter, duh. But this was the first instances of her losing her power, losing her control. When that Whisperer sees her crying and she's stabbed, like, that's a huge indicator. That's basically foreshadowing what's coming maybe next episode and into season 10 about Alpha losing her power and control. Like, she's teetering, and I think these are the first signs. So as much as it seems like, oh, she infiltrated the fair and she won, and she, in a way, she really lost. She really did. And that's why I think they had the Sadiq eulogy, where Sadiq says that all of our all the people that were piked were heroes that tried to fight back. And it reinforces that point, that as much as it's traumatic that this happened, in a way, Alpha's the real loser. Like, she really is. Despite everything, her hoard, all of her power, she showed immense hypocrisy and weakness. And even members in her own rank were kind of like, what? Like, the one who saw her cry, Beta being a little bit questionable about, like, why were we doing this in the first place? And I like that. I like that there's a little bit of dissent, and it brings us further into what we're going to see from her and the Whisperers moving forward. So all of that's great, and I gotta give the episode points for that, but some of those plot holes I mentioned bring it down a little bit, and I just wish there was a little more emphasis on the... Like, there were some plot points that were just brought up so briefly in this episode. Like, they were like mini plot points. Like, there was like a brief love triangle in this episode between Addie, who's the curly-haired girl who also gets piked, Henry, and Lydia. Those douchebag guys that were getting drunk with Henry a couple of episodes ago go up to Lydia and basically start a rumor that Henry has a thing for Addie, and it gets Lydia immensely jealous, and she ends up throwing goat shit in their face, which is pretty funny. I mean, but, yeah, and then Lydia has to go up to Henry and explain what happened, and it was just like this really brief, odd plot point where there was like almost like teen drama romance from like a sitcom comedy show or something. And it was just like a very brief thing. And I guess maybe it was a way for Henry to like, and Lydia to really solidify their love for each other before it all went to hell. But it was odd. It was cool to see Lydia's reaction to the fair because she's like just shell-shocked, doesn't know really how to act about any of it. But, yeah, it was just odd. Odd is the best word for that weird love triangle that lasted all of like 5 minutes before two of the people in the love triangle were just killed. So, as you guys can notice now, I'm not talking about the Pike victims. I will in a couple of videos. One will be a collaboration video I'm filming later today. So tune in for that, because you guys will get my full opinions on a lot of the things I disagree with on this decision. So for now, I'm going to leave it at a 7.8, I guess, for this episode. I mean, it seems like a low score compared to my previous episodes that I've scored very highly, but I think they worked. As a contained episode, they worked. As a contained episode for this one, there were a lot of things that didn't work, that needed a little more explanation. You're dealing with a lot of character deaths in a very precarious situation. Like, you need to have all of the cogs and moving parts really sync up so that when one gear goes, the other gears move with it. And it just feels like certain gears were moving, but you didn't know why they were moving. You didn't see the part. Like, it just like, you could see, like, you're like, okay, but like, you shrug your shoulders and you're like, what? Like, how is this happening? Like, these people have been living 6 years guarded, building their army after the events of the Saviors and all-out war, and somehow this woman is able to steal 8 people and bring them to this barn, and like, it's just ludicrous, bit ludicrous, but we'll deal with all these things moving forward. So for now, I'm going to end the vlog. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll be talking about those Pike victims coming up. Thanks.